Hey everyone, and welcome to the Making Room podcast, where we clear out the clutter and make more room for God to move in our lives. I'm your host, Paul Radke. My guest today is Brian Sanders. He's Executive Vice President of Positive Alternative Radio based in Virginia. He's also the author of 2 books. He has been in leadership for many years now and has a wealth of knowledge that he's going to share with us today. If you're in any sort of leadership position or you want to be in the future, I encourage you to listen to this episode. Brian is an authentic and vulnerable leader who shares with us some of the things that he has learned in leadership and some tools that we can use to become better leaders. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. Let's jump right in. Hey, Brian, it's awesome to have you on the podcast today. Such an honor. You've been connected with my family and a few mutual friends for a long time from your time spent in New Orleans. And so that's how we kind of know each other. I keep up with you mostly on Facebook. And most of what I see from you on Facebook is either Star Wars or, which I love too, or I see that you've read a book and you read, just a ridiculous amount of books every year. And after every post about a book you've read, you say leaders or readers. And I love that because we've got to continue learning. And you believe in it so much that you even wrote a book, Leadership Endurance, which I've been reading and is fantastic. And I love the emphasis that you put on needing to have endurance as a leader. And I kind of have this analogy, I'll share it with you real quick, is that if I asked you to hold a bottle of water for a few minutes, then that would be no problem. If I asked you to hold a bottle of water for the rest of the day, that would be a little bit heavier. If I asked you to hold it for a year, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, that bottle of water that once wasn't that heavy could all of a sudden be really weighty. And that's how I think of leadership and the endurance that we need as leaders. What are some things that you do to keep your endurance up, to continue being a good leader through all of the highs and lows of what that's like?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah.
Secondly, thank you for making me feel old. I told you this before we started. I've known your family for 30 years, maybe longer. And I think the first time I met you, you were probably 2 years old. And you were walking up the steps of the church.
You didn't have to tell on yourself like that, but now it's out there.
It's fine. So thank you to you, and thank you to your family and the influence you've had in my life. So what do I do to endure? Well, one, I'm going to say this. I'm going to pray.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm going to take things to Jesus. I'm going to take those things to Him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. 2.
I thought you were going to pray right now.
No, I'm not going to pray right now. I don't have to endure this.
Gotcha. All right.
Secondly, use history and get some perspective. I love to read about Abraham Lincoln. I love to read about Abraham Lincoln. He's a hero of mine.
Yeah.
Ulysses S. Grant, Winston Churchill, and then also FDR. And let me explain why. Those men faced incredible obstacles. Civil War, World War II. They're going to face stuff that I'll never have to lead through.
Yeah.
So I read books about them so that I can keep a perspective. Hey, Brian, if they can endure that, you can endure this. So get yourself a hero, usually somebody who's dead, because if you have a hero who's dead, they can't screw up anymore.
Right.
So
they can't let you down anymore than they already have.
They're done, letting people down. And so start reading about that hero, and it'll give you perspective for you.
Yeah.
Third, always look at the past to give you fuel for the future. In other words, what you endured yesterday is it's a teaching lab to help you get through today. So if you went through something rough last year, Well, you can face next year knowing, hey, if I can go through that, I can endure this.
Yeah.
Finally, constantly read. Now, so some people say, I don't like to read. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with you? But there's also audiobooks, there's TED Talks, there's things like that. Get those in you. And as you do that, here's what we'll say. Listen for stories. Don't just read to learn different principles. You got to listen for stories. People will remember a story longer than they will a principle.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can start getting stories in your life of leaders and what they faced, do it. I love to read about Steve Jobs. There's a great book, Barbarians at the Gate. It's the story of Nabisco and what they endured and had to go and had to go through. And it's like this thick. I mean, it's going to take you a month to read it. But what you're going to realize is that pastors, business leaders, entrepreneurs, you're going to have to make what often seems like life and death decisions just to keep the organization moving forward. And you need to know that, hey, you're not the only person who's like been through that. I hope that answers that question. And I apologize for talking so much. So
No, absolutely. That's exactly what I needed to hear. And I think, what you said about story, I think is so powerful, because story really does connect all of us. You can give me all the information you want to, but until it connects to story where I can really relate to it, I don't really know how to apply that wisdom and apply that knowledge. And that's something you do in your book, is you tell a lot of stories and really help connect the dots. I love your emphasis early on in the book, which you talk a lot about leaders need to be patient, and leaders need to be okay with taking things one step at a time. Something I am not at all good at, right? I'm ready to get to step 5 before I even take step 1. How do you maintain that patience when, as leaders, we just have such great big things that we want to accomplish, things that we want to see get done, but until we are willing to be patient and take that step by step, we'll probably never see that.
Well, first of all, Brian's not a patient person. If you work for me within the organization, there's a famous saying that if Brian wants something done, he wanted it done yesterday. Okay. But there's a rule. I have to be patient with the mission of accomplishing the mission. I'm impatient with the task that will accomplish getting there. So I know that this up here is going to take me a while to achieve. Okay, I got that. Everything else underneath that will help me get there, it's on.
Yeah.
Okay, it's on. Secondly, realize this too, that I'm a little older and I got the gray to show it. Life has a way of kind of slowing you down. And people have a way of actually slowing you down. You read about the Civil War and you read how Lincoln's generals, they were trying to get certain places. And Lincoln wanted them to attack on these certain days. Weather slowed them down.
Yeah.
And then people, you have generals who thought that Lincoln was actually crazy. And so they didn't attack. They just sat back and said, the president, I don't respect him. I don't believe in him. So they didn't attack. So you're going to realize that life isn't like this. Life is, more like
Up
it
and
looks like
down
an EKG. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what it does. So patience. I'm not a fan of it. I don't do it I don't do it. I don't do it very well.
Yeah, me neither.
But here we are. And I will also say this, that as you go through your different leadership journey, there will be certain phases when you're whenever you have to be impatient.
Mm-hmm.
For example, let's say that you're a pastor and you're trying to move into a building and you have to raise $1 million to get there,
Mm-hmm.
but you only have 90 days to like close on the building.
Yeah.
Well, that closing date makes you patient because that's the day you sign the paperwork. The fundraising needed to do that will make you impatient.
Yeah.
So
I found, and I have definitely failed at this miserably many times, but I have found that one of the areas that I've got to focus on being patient. If I want to see growth, if I want to see everything come to the fullest potential that it can, I have to not just be patient with me and my development, but I've got to be patient with my team and the people I work with to develop them and to help them grow. Which I think as a leader, I definitely could have done better with that. And I'm working to do better with that. Even though right now I'm kind of a one-man team. So I'm doing great with it at the moment.
well, give yourself grace because there is no such thing as a perfect leader. There was only one.
Yeah.
His name was Jesus. The rest of us were just a hot mess. And you should constantly be trying to replace yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So pour into them. So here's what I'm going to say. I have my team read 2 books a year.
Mm-hmm.
I usually read between 50 to 65 books a year because I want them to read the best of the best, or what I feel is the best of the best,
Mm-hmm.
and to develop them because I know Brian isn't going to always be here. So I need to be developing them.
Yeah.
And and people will drive you up a wall. I mean, so you got to have a little bit of patience there, and you can't. Let me say this. How do I want to say this? If you're impatient with people, you're probably not going to do well with having customers or even having congregants. Or
Right.
I mean, we have donors, here at the organization. Well, you need to be patient because you can't force people to write you a check.
Yeah.
And what this is for employees. They just almost say for a leader for people who have employees. If people aren't where you want them to be, it's on you.
Yeah.
What haven't you shared? What story hasn't connected yet?
Yeah.
What hasn't transferred from knowing it to the and then going to the heart and actually doing it?
Yeah.
There's something there that hasn't clicked yet.
Yeah. For me, I've definitely discovered that people are the priority. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what you're trying to build, what you want to grow, the organization, everything at some point has to take second place to growing the people that are in the organization. And as you develop them, I've discovered that teaching others really does help you to learn and grow as well. So as you're pouring into others, they somehow pour into you at the same time, and you build one another up. And if we focus more on people, then we will see our organizations and our churches and whatever it is we're trying to achieve really come to the fullness of what God has, because that's his focus. At the end of the day, God's focus is on people. And I just believe as leaders, that should be our focus too. How did you get to this point of deciding, all right, I want to be in leadership. Not only am I going to start pouring into people and encouraging them and building them up, but then I also want to influence other leaders, write books and host talks and stuff like that.
Lived in New Orleans for 15 years, worked for WBSN Life Songs for 15 years. And I just started feeling this stirring, that Brian, you can do more. Go and lead. And my wife and I went on a weekend up to the Smoky Mountains and we just prayed. We took a concert. Well, there was a series of concerts going on, Christian concerts, and we prayed. And this artist took the stage. And it's like, and these experiences don't happen often.
Mm-hmm.
but they sing a song called Go. And I remember I looked at her and she looked at me and she says, this is for us. We're supposed to go.
Hmm.
And I said, where are we going to go? I mean, we don't have a job.
Yeah.
So I applied and came here to Positive Alternative Radio, and where I serve. And how do I want to say this? I wanted to be a leader who believed in his people, that this is where we are and this is where we can be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the decision that I made. And I guess my answer for you is this. You know what you were made to do. At some point, you got to figure that out. And I figured out I was built to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love this. Every morning I get up, I'm as excited as a kid in a candy store. I get to come in and build up people. I get to come in and see them soar and see them fly, see them help fulfill the mission, help to pursue the vision. How did I decide to know to invest in people? They will get more done than I ever will.
Yeah.
They'll get it. James Comey, who was very controversial, I don't want to get into a political thing. He wrote a book called Higher Loyalty. He was in the Justice Department during 9/11.
Uh-huh.
After 9/11, he would go to the White House and meet with George W. Bush. And they would have these daily meetings. And this was about a response to terror. And he said he got in his first meeting and he looked around the room and there was Dick Cheney, there was Condoleezza Rice, there was the president, and there were a few other, there was Andy Card and some other people. And he said it hit him, it's just us. And I've never forgotten that story. It's just us. And he said Bush would actually invest it, would actually teach them stories, teach them principles and stuff like that. And I'm like, your team, it's just y'all. So you've got to invest in it.
Yeah.
Just like that team carried us through 9/11 and the response to it, your team has to carry you through whatever it is.
Yeah. Who's
There's
somebody?
a story. There's a story for you.
Who's somebody that did that for you? That isn't dead. Well, in other words, like not Abraham Lincoln or Winston Churchill. Somebody in your life directly.
My dad.
Hmm.
Dad and I wrote a book about. There you go. There's my
another book.
first book plug. Okay,
Right.
Be like Dad. I wrote 50 stories about him, and Dad was a master storyteller. And he could tell stories, and then from those stories, he could illustrate it. He could take that and make it into a principle, and he'd use that story to illustrate. So that would be who impacted me the most. Would be Dad.
Yeah, that's awesome. I read something recently that was talking about fathers and how men relate to their fathers. And in the book, they said, I'm pretty convinced that most men are either trying to live up to the expectations of their fathers or make up for their sins. And I've really just been thinking about that a lot. I think for me, it would probably be both, if anything. I don't think I'm one or the other. How do you relate to that statement?
I've never thought about making up for sins. I've always tried to be, I want to be the man that my dad was. I want to be the leader my dad was. I want to have the character that he had.
Yeah.
I want to, that's an interesting quote. Because if I sinned, my dad would bring judgment very, very swiftly. So I think I've paid for those.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I'm trying to live up to his standard, if that makes sense.
His character.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful to have people in our lives. And I've discovered this as I've gotten older, is that you
Shut
don't
up.
just
No, older.
has
Son,
gotten older. I mean, I'm pushing 40 now, not to make you feel
well,
even older, but
my word, we're pushing forward. Like Fox older than you.
it still counts. So as I've gotten older, Brian, because I am getting older, we're all getting older. I've really come to appreciate one, not only the people that have really poured into me and taught me things that I would have otherwise learned a really hard lesson. They tried to cut it off so I didn't have to learn the hard things the hard way, the way they learned them. But also appreciating people just being human and not only being able to learn from their successes, but being able to learn from their failures and the things that they didn't get right. And I am big on this podcast about being authentic and being vulnerable, not only with the things I've done well, but with the things that I've really gotten wrong. And I find that's a really great way to connect and inspire people. It definitely inspires me.
Um, I'm big on authenticity. That's a lot of my brand.
Mm-hmm.
Is being authentic, is being real. Because I find that leaders often suffer in silence because Elizabeth Elliot said loneliness is a required course for leadership, and it's true.
Mm-hmm.
You see the entire chessboard. Your team only sees their particular square.
Yeah.
And you can't expect them to see the entire chessboard. They're going to go out to lunch and they're going to gripe and complain. Almost use a different word that I shouldn't have. And you have to be okay with that. You got to let them do that. But they don't see the whole board.
Right.
And you need to develop a couple of friendships outside of work.
Mm-hmm.
Where you can vent as a leader and where you can go to and talk about things because because you can't depend on your team for that. They are not going to do that. Second, when I first got hired here, I took over a bunch of commercial radio stations for the boss. And I failed miserably in the first year, failed miserably. And I went to him and I said, you need to fire me. He says, no, I'm going to put you over all of our non-com stations, over all of our Christian stations. And that's like, fire me. He says, no. He says, I just paid for your education.
Yeah.
And we've done amazingly well. I mean, since then, I've been here, we will have been here 20 years next year. And so that's a good example for me that you got to let people fail. And yet he let me fail, and it made me a better leader. And you read, this is for those who are believers watching the podcast, go read that great hall of faith in the book of Hebrews. There are no success stories.
Yeah.
Every one of them was a failure. I even say this, it would be very hard for any one of those people to get hired at church today.
Right, exactly.
What did it like? You murdered somebody?
Right.
You want to be on staff here? Well, no, we can't hire you.
Right.
I mean, it's just rock over. So.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what, as leaders especially, but just as people, it's important to keep self-awareness. And this kind of goes to what you're talking about employees complaining and stuff like that. My dad taught me, and there's a scripture somewhere, I believe it's in Proverbs, that goes along with this. But basically, when you hear about people complaining about you as their leader, as their pastor, or in Solomon's case, as their king, don't get upset, but remember that you've complained about somebody else that was in authority over you. And I've always tried to keep that in mind when I hear things, because as a leader, it's tough at times knowing that you're the topic of other people's disgruntledness, right? Knowing that you're the one causing them pain in some way, whether right or wrong, whatever it is. But keeping in mind that, you know what, I do this and I shouldn't judge them by their statements when I've made the same statements about other people. Am I messing with you?
No, you are being real. And okay, should it be easy to have other people's lives in your hand?
Yeah.
No.
Right.
Should it cause you stress? Yes, because that stress will help you make a better decision.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that stress can also freeze you from making a decision.
Yeah.
So let's just bottom line it. For every person who complains about the leader and who thinks they could do a better job than the leader,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they really know what they're talking about.
Yeah. They don't know the
Because
weight of leadership.
they haven't sat there with that weight, with whatever, and you got to be fine with that.
Yeah.
I'd ask Dad, I said, Dad, how do you sleep at night with all this? And he says, necking with a fan on. He just, he, you know, in other words, we were talking one day about he served in the Air Force for like 20 years. And then he went on to manage a paper plant and that kind of stuff. And we were talking about the price of being in the military, the price that it took. And he said, the day I signed those papers, I knew there was a chance I could be killed in the war. He said, and you have, and his point to me was this. He says, whatever you decide to do, you better be comfortable with the consequences. Mm-hmm. That was his lesson to me that day.
Yeah.
But he said, before I signed those papers, I had to ask myself, will I be okay if they send me to war and if I die? Mm-hmm. He says, and what was that?
I have no idea. You know what? I've been recording and these thumbs up have been popping up that I don't know what that, look, it just did it. I don't know what that's about. You've got balloons. I guess the computer just thinks we're good at what we're saying.
Oh, and so his point is that he had to accept whatever consequences were to come.
Yeah.
So as a leader, you have this amazing vision, you have this amazing mission, and this dream that you want to pursue. Okay. And that drives you.
Yeah.
You've got to figure out, are you willing to pay the price to fulfill it?
Right.
Sleepless nights, people angry, people running you down, firing people, hiring people. Where are we going to get the money for this to do this? What's going to happen? People not understanding you explaining as a leader, you're going to explain something 1,000 times. Mm-hmm. Being what I've often taught my folks is that being a leader is often like being a parent. That you're going to repeat yourself over and over and over again, and you got to be okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would add to that just like until you have kids, you don't know what it's like. Until you're sitting in the big seat, you don't know what it's like. You can read all the books you want to read and get all the knowledge you want to have, and that'll benefit you. But until you're the one doing it, you're the one making the decisions, you're the one with other people's careers and lives in your hand, you don't know the weight of that and how you respond to it until you're in the moment. And you know what? I don't have kids yet, but I've taken it to heart. Is that, you always say, oh, my kids will never do this, never do that. I'm going to be different. Right. Until you have them. And then it's exactly the path you wind up going down. And it's the same. I think it's very similar to leadership. You have all of these ideals that, if I did it, this is how I would do it. Not until you're the one sitting in the seat, you don't know how you respond. Do you think that leaders are made or leaders are born? Or which camp do you kind of find yourself in?
Greatest One of the greatest leadership books ever written is Forged in Crisis by Nancy Kane. She's a Harvard business history professor.
Mm-hmm.
And after I read it, I actually reached out to her and we've become friends. She's done multiple Zooms for us for the team. Her premise is this, is you're born with certain abilities, but it takes crises, it takes situations to see what those abilities are.
Mm.
And it's Fortune in Crisis, Nancy Kane.
Okay.
You can have all the ability in the world, but if you don't ever want to accomplish anything, how do we know what that skill set is?
Right.
Lincoln faced, she talks about Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, Rachel Carson, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and there's one other leader that she talked, and Grant. I think she talks, is it Grant? I don't know, crap. But there are, sorry about that, but there are five.
No, you're good.
I'm very authentic and real. So
yeah, I'm glad.
I love Jesus.
That's what we're about on this podcast.
I love Jesus, but I cuss a little. Just know.
Saw that.
So in her book, she walks you through these people's transformations. You're going to have to face some stuff. You're going to have to look failure in the eye. Mm-hmm. Lincoln looked at the Union falling apart. And so his goal became, how do I save the Union? And then through that, he said, how do I free a people? So his goal was this, and then it became this.
Yeah.
I mean, the Douglass, Frederick Douglass, his was, how do I become free? And then it was, how do I help free a people? For me, I will attack on this. Every leader is going to have insecurities, and they're going to have fears. Mine, I have a speech defect, and I run 5 radio networks. There it was. So I actually stutter. Mm-hmm. And that gives me tremendous insecurities. Stuff like this, it takes so much courage for me to say yes to this, mm-hmm. because I know I'm going to get on here and I'm going to stutter and I'm going to stammer. Secondly, I am a large man. Now, in the past 2 years, I've lost 84 pounds. I go to a gym, that kind of stuff.
Congratulations on that.
Oh, stop. I could be at Popeyes in 10 minutes. So stop. Stop.
It's still, hey, I appreciate your own accomplishments. That's an accomplishment.
So for me, whenever I enter a room, I know the first thing people are thinking, crap, just, look at him. He's huge. What's wrong with him? Well, what's wrong with me is that I like chicken. Well, what's wrong with me? I like, that's what's wrong with me. Shut up. What I often, and so how do I endure that? Uh-huh. For me, for that, this is how I think everybody is addicted to something. You can just see mine.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't wrestle with like big decisions. Jack Welch, who ran GE, wrote a book called Winning. I highly recommend it for any leader. It's probably one of the best leadership books ever written. Welch struggled with huge decisions like $1 billion deals. He would stay up all night long. But at the same time, he didn't mind firing 200,000 people. It's just your different skill set. So how are you made?
Yeah.
And that goes back to your question, are you made or are you forged? I mean, are you born with it or are you forged? I'm going to lean more toward the forged.
Yeah.
Because it's in those times that you are made into who you want to be.
One of the spiritual, it's kind of a spiritual look at that is that the things of God become ours by reason of use. So if we're trying to grow spiritually in any part of life, we really won't grow until there's a reason that we need to grow into that aspect. So that's why they say don't pray for patience, because God's going to give you patience so that you can become more patient. And I think in leadership, I think I would agree with you is that as things are placed on our shoulders, with each thing that's placed on our shoulders, we have a decision to make. Am
That
I going to meet the challenge that is being presented to me? Or am I going to back up and try and get rid of the weight? And leaders are those, I think, that take the weight and say, I'm going to meet the demands of this thing that I'm facing. And, there's, we put so much stock into leadership and having the big chair and having the big salary and all of that. But Jesus demonstrated to us that leaders are those that serve the most. And if you're trying to get to the big seat just so you can make the big decisions and have all the say, you're gonna crumble under the weight of leadership.
100% accurate. Um, Let me just give you a few points about that from Scripture itself.
Yeah.
I've heard leaders; these are especially spiritual leaders, and I love these men and women. They would get on stage and say, "Claim your Canaan, claim your promised land."
Mm-hmm.
And what they're saying is that God promised the Jewish people that they would have a land, and that's the story of a lot of the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it, but to get from where they were to getting the promised land, they had to leave Egypt. They had to fight and defeat Jebusites, Canaanites, the Hittites.
Yeah.
They had to go through all these battles. And so there's a lesson there for me that says, if you want a promised land, be prepared to fight.
Yeah.
There are battles you're going to have to engage.
Mm-hmm.
That's a spiritual principle that's from Scripture itself.
Yeah.
Secondly, Jesus said that the gates of hell will not prevail against us. Okay, I'm thankful for that. But here's my question. How hard is hell going to fight?
Right. Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't really want to know how much I can endure. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, how bad's that fight going to be? And I think those are things that like people never think of. But when you get in the chair, you're going to find out how hard hell can fight.
Yeah.
Because they do not want you to be successful. Hell doesn't want to. So understand that. Third, I'm going to say this. There's grace. He is not going to judge you. Jesus will not judge you by whether you fail or else succeed. He went to the cross. So don't think that, oh man, I messed up this over here. God hates me. Don't.
Yeah.
That isn't true. And we often judge ourselves as leaders by that.
Yeah.
Finally, this is a leadership principle of mine. You can always fix any mistake. And so I tell my team, I actually gave them permission slips to screw up because I don't want them living under this burden.
Yeah.
Of having to think that they have to make every decision perfect. No, I don't want you thinking. Now, do I wish we could? Yeah. Lord, I screw up. Paul screws up. I mean, you should. I mean, so
I certainly screw up.
so take that burden off of you.
Yeah.
Make the best decision you can, and when you do make a wrong turn, adjust and keep on going.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how God views us. It's certainly, and he lays out the example. What for you, I mean, since we all fail and we want to have a culture where failure is acceptable, because if people are too scared to fail, they're also going to be too scared to take risk to succeed and grow.
Yeah.
So what for you is the line where, all right, this person is just not going to work?
If I knew you were going to ask that, I would have brought a rubber band. I've used this illustration with my team. People are like rubber bands, and they're going to go like this and aggravate you. And then some days they're going to be like this. They're going to make great, great progress. And then do this.
Uh-huh.
You're going to have to realize that there comes a point when, okay, we're about to snap.
Yeah.
And that's when you get involved and you have to say, I don't know this is working now.
Yeah.
So for us, it is, okay, for us, culture's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to have fun while you work here. I want you to love it. I want you to, but I also want you to work hard.
Yeah.
To put your all into it. And for some folks, they're just not going to fit the culture. I mean, we've actually had people say, I came here to have a job. I didn't come here to laugh. And it seems like y'all want us to be friends with people we work with. Well, yeah, I mean, because if you enjoy where you work, you'll get more done. You'll be, I'm not into that. I just, bye.
Right.
Okay, see you later. Secondly, you're just going to realize there are people that just can't do it. There are going to be people who are going to, and how do I want to say this? That they would be a better fit somewhere else.
Yeah.
That this isn't their thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have to make a hard call.
Yeah. It's not an easy thing making that call.
No, it's not an easy thing. And if it is, you are heartless.
Right.
It should keep you awake at night. It should make you, it should, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think being able just to cut somebody off and fire them and act like it's not a big deal, then you are completely self-involved. You were just only concerned about you or your business or whatever. And really, at the end of the day, that's not a leader.
Yeah.
It's not a leader. It's a boss, but it's not a leader.
100% spot on. There was one thing that I'll add to that, and this is a lesson from Jack Welch, who ran GE. When you do let somebody go, you should go to your leadership team and tell them why you did it, so they can learn from that.
Yeah.
Don't fire people in silence.
Yeah.
And secondly, firing people shouldn't be a shock. Uh-huh. In other words, if you fire somebody, they should see it coming. It should be a train screaming down the track. Mm-hmm. Because if that's the first time you ever talk to them about their performance, that is bad on you as a leader. You should be having these things, these different conversations all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. And you know what? We don't talk all that often. We've probably, until this conversation, this is probably the longest conversation we've had together. But just seeing your post on Facebook and how you do your best to inspire others. I know it seems like a small thing to post on Facebook, but really it does inspire me to keep on reading, to keep on learning, to keep on being the best leader that I can be. Your book is doing the same thing. And so just thank you for taking the time to develop the things in you so that you could develop the things in other people. I think that's a wonderful example, and I hope to do the same thing.
You're doing great. I'm proud of you. I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for your family. And so thankful for this opportunity. Hey, and if people, this is the book, leadership book.
Yes, I was going to show the same thing.
You can go to Amazon and get it and there. So, or on your tablet, that's up to, there's even an audio version. I can read it to you if you want to.
Yeah. Do you do the audio version?
Oh, yeah.
Read it? Okay, cool.
Audio version. So there's that. Yeah. So Paul, thank you. so much. This has been a high honor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope that you heard something that was valuable for your life. Do me a favor and help this audience to grow by sharing it with a family member or a friend. Also, hit the like, subscribe, or follow button so that you continue to be updated when new episodes are released. I appreciate you all so much, and I look forward to being with you again next week as we continue making room.